Hello and welcome along to this video on the installation of the World Archery software package Ianseo, which is used for tournament administration. I'm going to look at a couple of ways that Ianseo can be installed and go through how this works. But before we do that, we need to understand what components Ianseo has. There are two primary components for the Ianseo package. One is a database, which is where all of the tournament information, things like archers' names or entrance names, and their scores are stored. And that is typically a MySQL type database, and we're going to use one called MariaDB, which is free, open source, and available for many devices. The other part of it is the web server, which is the front end of things, which allows you to click through and see the data that's been entered into the database, and to of course do things like add athletes, enter scores, and print results. So out of these two parts, Ianseo themselves, from their website, which is World Archery's ianseo.net, you can click on the software and manuals, and you will find the software download packages for Ianseo for Windows, Linux, and Apple macOS. That, however, is only part of the requirements. That's the application itself. You still need those other requirements first, which is of course the database and the web server. For this video, I'm going to take you through the installation of Ianseo using the XAMPP application. If we were to Google XAMPP, you will find it's written by Apache friends. It is a nice packaged software application set which has a number of things that we require. It has bundled all of the database elements, the web server elements together into one nice, easy to use application, and from there, once that's set up and running on our device, we can simply download and add the Ianseo software set and run it on our machine. I wouldn't be using the latest version at this point in time, so I'm going to click here on the download other versions, and depending on what you're using, whether it's Windows or Linux, for this particular video I'm going to be using XAMPP for OS X, and I'm going to be looking at using the version 7.4 with PHP 7.4.2, and I can download that here on my machine. That download is now finished, and if we go to our downloads folder, we can see it's here. There is an issue with this, and I'm not quite sure what has caused it. It's happened a couple of times for me on this site. It's downloaded as a .bz2 instead of the expected disk image. If we go to our downloads and we hover over the link we clicked on, we can see that it was expecting to download a .dmg, which is the Apple disk image, and instead we've received something else. So I'm just going to change, in this instance, the file suffix, which is now recognized as a disk image, and I'm now able to mount that ready for installation. Open up our installer, which of course asks us to authenticate, which we will do. And we'll just accept the defaults. This is going to install a folder called XAMPP into our applications directory, which will be absolutely fine for our needs. Don't need to learn more about that. And off it goes. That's the end of the installer process there. It says we can launch it straight off, which we might as well do. Let's see what it does. There we go. We can remove the installation package, and we have this window here, which is the application manager. So we can add that to our dock. Before we get into the application manager itself, we might as well have a look at what it's put on the machine. So If I go to find out where this is, we will discover that it is inside our XAMPP folder that was created, inside our applications folder, and this is the actual manager application itself. We can find that from our applications XAMPP. There's an alias here that it adds for you. You can tell from the little alias icon on it. Inside XAMPP files, and this is where XAMPP stores all of its bits and bobs that it uses. One of the key folders that we're going to use is actually the htdocs, which is the sort of the web folder for when it hosts a website. And it's in this folder here, which is where we're going to put our Ianseo package to run from there. Before we get to that, if we have a look at our manager, over on this second tab, we have Manage Servers. We can see by default it started up the Apache web server. That's one part of what we need running. The other part is our MySQL database. So it's as straightforward as just clicking Start on that, and that's going to boot up a database on our machine ready to connect to for anything we want to use. There we go. We can have a look at our local server by going to 127.0.0.1, and that will automatically direct us to the dashboard, which is built in and provided by default for XAMPP. And if you see this page, then XAMPP has been installed successfully and is running the web server as you would expect. The next step is to get Ianseo itself connected to this so that we can go to 127.0.0.1/Ianseo, which at this point in time does not work because we have not set that up. So I'm going to go across now over here to our software downloads from Ianseo. And you can see that it has this option here for install files for all platforms in zip format. And that is the download that we're wanting. So at the time of this, I'm downloading the April 2021 Ianseo release. And once that comes down, we're going to put that into this folder here. Actually, what I'll do is I'll create that now. So I'll create a new folder, and we'll just call that Ianseo for simplicity. And that is where our install files are going to go as soon as they have finished downloading. That download is now complete. So if we go and have a look at where those files are, we will find that in our downloads folder. I'll just extract that. We're expecting a zip file here. And this is the Ianseo application itself. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the contents of that folder. There's a couple of ways. You could either move the folder and rename it, or you can just move all of the contents. Either works just as well. We'll clean up our downloads folder. We don't need that anymore. And here in our XAMPP htdocs Ianseo folder is the Ianseo application. Now that's just about ready to run. However, I have found with this particular software, permissions can be a bit of a problem. If I was to go back to our htdocs folder, oops, wrong one, htdocs, permissions at this level, by default, if we get info on that, you will see that it has the current user with read and write permissions, but only read permissions for everyone else. And this causes problems when the web server from XAMPP tries to write changes or edit files, and it's unable to do that. So what I want to do here is change some permissions. I'm going to use our terminal application. So you can either go Spotlight Terminal or find it in your utilities folder, whichever works. And nothing to be too scared of with the terminal application. We're going to go to our applications, XAMPP, htdocs, Ianseo, and what I want to do is basically get to this folder here. So I'm going to type cd for change directory, space, and then I can just drag that Ianseo folder here. It's going to autofill that path for me, and I actually want to be at the htdocs folder. I want to be one level above the Ianseo folder. So I'm just going to delete that last one off there. And if we were to go ls for list, we will see that we are in this folder here. It's showing us all of that information. What I'm going to do is show you the permissions change for Ianseo itself. If I type ls space -l for long list, you can see here that the Ianseo folder is owned by our admin user and a group admin, and this here is our permissions, which is read, write, execute for each of the users, and they can be read left to right as owner, group, and other, or everyone if you prefer. I'm going to use the built-in command of chown, which is for changing ownership. I'm then going to do a -R for recursive to make sure that it doesn't just change this folder, but it changes all of the files inside as well. And I'm going to change that to be owned by nobody, and then colon, and specify the group nobody as well. And then I'm going to target that to the Ianseo folder that we've got there. Now that has come up with an operation not permitted, and that is because I haven't run this with the user who has rights to change permissions. So if I press the up arrow, I can run this command again, but this time I'm going to put sudo, or super user do, in front of it, and that's going to run it with elevated permissions and make sure that that change happens. It's going to ask me for my credentials, and this can only happen if you are an administrator on this device. That's now run, so if I do an ls-l again, we will see that nobody is the user and the group for Ianseo, but we haven't changed the permissions yet. So for that we need one more command, which is chmod, which stands for change the modification attributes. Once again, we're going to make this recursive with a -R, and I'm just going to use the shorthand all, or A, plus RWX, and that's basically all users, groups, and everyone else. I'm adding read, write, and execute permissions to everything here, and we're going to do that on the Ianseo folder. Once again, we need to run that with elevated permissions, so I'm going to put sudo in front of that command. If we do once more our long list, we can see that this has all read, write, execute on that Ianseo folder, and we're now good to go for basically any web user that is running that Ianseo package will now have full rights to modify files within there. And that's just the easiest way, especially if you're the only one using this computer, that you can allow the XAMPP all of the permissions it needs to this particular folder. We can now close all of that. We don't need that anymore, and we'll go back to our manager, confirm that our database and our web server are both already running, and then from our web browser we can refresh our 127.0.0.1, which is the address to our local computer, /Ianseo, which is the folder name we created, and we have arrived at this screen here. So we can tell from this that it's doing something, it's found the right files, but we're getting various errors. The reason we're getting this errors is because by default Ianseo comes with a config file that points you at a non-existent database. We haven't configured it and gone through the initial installation yet, which allows us to connect and create the tables for Ianseo in the database, so it's not going to work. So we have to fix that before we can continue. If we go back to our installation folder, so inside the htdocs Ianseo, where we've installed the Ianseo software, inside the common folder there is a file here called config.inc.php. If you are unable to see the file suffixes, so the .phps on things, that's something you need to turn on. Find a preferences, advanced, and show all file name extensions will do that for you, but as you can see it was showing them without, so there are only some extensions that it doesn't let you do. So this file here is the configuration file that handles the database connections. At this point in time we haven't actually set up any of that, and Ianseo has a built-in first run setup process that it can do if this file doesn't exist. So the easiest thing for us here is to delete that and then reload Ianseo. There we are. So it has automatically detected that the config file is missing, it doesn't exist, and it's taken us, as you can see here, to the installation process for Ianseo. So we'll accept the terms and conditions first time round, and this is showing us the initial PHP setup, which is part of our web server. XAMPP has done all this for us, which is really handy. We don't have to install any additional modules and other stuff to get Ianseo running. It's done for us by XAMPP. We'll continue from there, and we're now at our first time setup. We're going to use localhost, which is the local computer. We could use 127.0.0.1 here. They mean exactly the same thing. And I'm going to create a Ianseo username password with the database Ianseo, just to keep things simple. If you wanted to change these, of course you can, but if you're the only one using this product on your local machine, it probably is easiest to leave that as the defaults. There we go. Installation was successful. We can now return to Ianseo, and because it's the first time we've installed it, we'll re-accept the license, and it is going to, on its first run, do a self-update. So that's it, doing a check-in to World Archery's Ianseo site, downloading any updated language files or updates to the Ianseo software itself, and it'll go through that process for 2-3 minutes, depending on your internet connection, of course. And then once that's done, Ianseo is there, installed, and ready to go. As far as administering it from here on, all you need is the manager application, the application manager for XAMPP. You can start and stop this whenever you need, and it's quite straightforward to do. Obviously I won't while it's running its update, but you can click the stop all button down here, which will stop both the database and the web server, and then when you want to run Ianseo again, the first thing to do is to open the XAMPP manager, click on start, the database and the web server. The FTP, the server there, you're not going to use it, but if you wanted to click start all, it will start along with. It doesn't really cause any issues. So start all here, go to your web browser, type in your localhost /Ianseo address, and then you will be ready to use it. So have fun and enjoy. That installation process is finished. If I go back to competition open, we are now ready to start using Ianseo for the first time on this device. I hope you've enjoyed it and you found this video useful. Please leave a comment and let me know, give me some feedback on has this been successful for you and has it been easy enough to follow along. Thank you very much.